Hey guys, welcome back. It's Wednesday, April 29th. Let's look and see what part of our part 2 guide we have to complete for today. Our reading task is, or our reading section rather, is pages 88 through 96, and then we'll complete the corresponding reading task in our part 2 guide. So go ahead and have that open. You'll see here the task that correlates with that section of reading is to explain what is revealed about the society through the words of the women at Mildred's party. So your workspace over here, you're going to give me a quote from Mildred and then explain underneath what this quote reveals about society. You're going to give me a quote from Mrs. Phelps and then do the same thing underneath. What does this quote reveal about society? And then finally, her other friend, Mrs. Bowles, you'll get a quote from her. And then underneath, just give me a few complete sentences explaining what this quote reveals about society. So why don't we go ahead and get started reading together. Meet me at page 88. We will read a few and then I will leave you to finish the rest. So Montag had met up with Faber and they're discussing their plan, right? So part of this plan is that Faber has given Montag this thing for him to put in his ear, and they can communicate that way. Um, so here we go. You could feel the war getting ready in the sky that night, the way the clouds moved aside and came back, and the way the stars looked, a million of them swimming between clouds like the enemy disks, and the feeling that the sky might fall upon the city and turn it to chalk dust, and the moon would go up in red fire. That was how the night felt. Montag walked from the subway with the money in his pocket. He had visited the bank, which was open all night and every night with robot tellers in attendance, and as he walked he was listening to the seashell radio in one ear. We have mobilized 1,000,000 men. Quick victory is ours if the war comes. Music flooded over the voice quickly and it was gone. 10,000,000 men mobilized, Faber's voice whispered in his other ear. But say 1,000,000. It's happier. Faber? Yes. I'm not thinking. I'm just doing like I'm told, like always. You said get the money and I got it. I didn't really think of it myself. When do I start working things out on my own? You've started already by saying what you just said. You'll have to take me on faith. I took others on faith. Yes, and look where we're headed. You'll have to travel blind for a while. Here's my arm to hold on to. I don't want to change sides and just be told what to do. There's no reason to change if I do that. On to 89. You're wise already. Montag felt his feet moving him on the sidewalk toward his house. Keep talking. Would you like me to read? I'll read so you can remember. I go to bed only 5 hours a night. Nothing to do. So if you like, I'll read you to sleep nights. They say you retain knowledge even when you're sleeping, if someone whispers it in your ear. Yes. Here. Far away across town in the night, the faintest whisper of a turned page. The Book of Job. That is my dog barking in the background. I hope you can't hear that. The moon rose in the sky as Montag walked, his lips moving just a trifle. He was eating a light supper at 9 in the evening when the front door cried out in the hall, and Mildred ran from the parlor like a native fleeing an eruption of Vesuvius. Mrs. Phelps and Mrs. Bowles came through the front door and vanished into the volcano's mouth with martinis in their hands. Montag stopped eating. So I hope that you notice here that Mildred has appeared on the scene, as well as Mrs. Phelps and Mrs. Bowles, who are the three people that we're focusing on for our reading task here. Remember, we want to find quotes from each of these ladies that show us something about society. They were like a monstrous crystal chandelier tinkling in 1,000 chimes. He saw their Cheshire cat smiles burning through the walls of the house, and now they were screaming at each other above the din. So here, this is just kind of an aside. Cheshire cat is capitalized here because we are making an allusion to a character from literature, which is from Alice and the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, so like Alice in Wonderland. So the Cheshire Cat is this guy. I'm sure y'all have seen it. You know who he is. See, this is the original version. This is the better version. That's the new creepy version. I'm not a fan, but to each their own. So he's comparing the ladies to having this like really creepy, overly happy grin. It's weird. Montag found himself at the parlor door with his food still in his mouth. "Doesn't everyone look nice?" "Nice." "You look fine, Milly." "Fine." "Everyone looks swell, swell." Montag stood watching them. Move on to page 90. "Patience," whispered Faber. "I shouldn't be here," whispered Montag, almost to himself. "I should be on my way back to you with the money. Tomorrow's time enough. Careful." "Isn't the show wonderful?" cried Mildred. "Wonderful." On one wall a woman smiled and drank orange juice simultaneously. "How does she do both at once?" thought Montag, insanely. In the other walls an X-ray of the same woman revealed the contracting journey of the refreshing beverage on its way to her delightful stomach. Abruptly the room took off on a rocket flight into the clouds. It plunged into a lime-green sea where blue fish ate red and yellow fish. A minute later 3 white cartoon clowns chopped off each other's limbs to the accompaniment of immense incoming tides of laughter. 2 minutes more and the room whipped out of town to the jet cars, wildly circling an arena, bashing and backing up and bashing each other again. Montag saw a number of bodies fly in the air. "Milly, did you see that?" So what he's talking about is what they're watching on TV. "I saw it, I saw it." Montag reached inside the parlor wall and pulled the main switch. The images drained away as if the water had been let out from a gigantic crystal bowl of hysterical fish. The 3 women turned slowly and looked with unconcealed irritation and then dislike at Montag. "When do you suppose the war will start?" he said. "I notice your husbands aren't here tonight." "Oh, they come and go," said Mrs. Phelps. "In again, out again, Finnegan. The army called Pete yesterday. He'll be back next week. The army said so. Quick war. 48 hours, they said, and everyone's home. That's what the army said. Quick war. Pete was called yesterday, and they said he'd be back next week. Quick." The 3 women fidgeted and looked nervously at the empty mud-colored walls. "I'm not worried," said Mrs. Phelps. "I'll let Pete do all the worrying." She giggled. "I'll let old Pete do all the worrying. Not me. I'm not worried. It's always someone else's husband dies, they say. I've heard that too. I've never known any dead man killed in war. Killed jumping off buildings, yes, like Gloria's husband last week. But from wars? No." "Not from wars," said Mrs. Phelps. "Anyway, Pete and I always said, 'No tears, nothing like that. It's our 3rd marriage each, and we're independent. Be independent,' we always said. He said, 'If I get killed off, you just go right ahead and don't cry, but get married again. And don't think of me.'" Oh my gosh, this is so insane. So you should be able to pause right here and complete a portion of your reading guide. This quote in particular from Miss Phelps is definitely significant. There's a lot going on in here. So she's talking about her husband going off to war and she doesn't even seem concerned about him dying. She's convinced herself that nothing could happen to him. And even if something does happen to him, this is the conversation that they've had. So Pete and I'm trying to highlight this. Pete and I always said no tears. It's our 3rd marriage each, and we're independent. Be independent. Get married again. Don't think of me. I'm going to copy this whole thing because it's just so outrageous and so good. So highlight and then right click to copy. And then I'm going to go back to my reading guide. And Miss Phelps is talking here. So I'm going to Control V to paste this. I'm going to make sure that I have my quotation marks around this. And then I'm also going to make sure that it's MLA citation. So I delete that period in the quote, and then I put down the page number. I believe this page, oops, I believe this is from page 91. Yep. And now I've got to say what this quote reveals about society. Some of y'all were struggling with the society and what society values questions from your part 1 guide. So remember, you want to think about their beliefs, what society finds important, because these individual people are meant to represent bigger ideas about the citizens of the society at large. They're not meant to be viewed in isolation. Remember, this whole novel is a social commentary. So uh, Mrs. Phelps explains how she is not worried about her husband being killed in war. This shows that above all else, society values remaining patriotic to their country, right? Because she's supporting the war even though it seems very violent. Additionally, this quote shows that her and her husband have been married multiple times. This reveals that marriage is something that is taken lightly and demonstrates that society believes um, marriages can be easily replaced. Ultimately, this devalues human connection, right? The person you marry is supposed to be, your soulmate, the love of your life. He's telling her, hey, babe, if I die, you can just go marry somebody else. That totally devalues human connection and people really building lifelong, meaningful relationships with others. Let's see if we can pull anything else out of here. Be independent, don't cry. Uh, Her husband's advice to her demonstrates that showing emotions is frowned upon in this society as well. So, uh, I went kind of hard on my explanation here, connecting it to society, mostly just to show y'all the different ways that you can pull out societal values from a quote that seems pretty straightforward and simple. I do not expect y'all to give me a paragraph explanation for each of yours, but about 2 to 4 sentences is sufficient. So use this as your example. Go ahead, you can take mine. I'm not going to dock off points, but with that being said, as you continue reading the rest of page 91 through 96, I want those other 2 examples to be your own. So you'll find a quote that Mildred says that you think you could connect to society, and then you're going to do the same exact thing for Mrs. Bowles. So good luck, enjoy the rest of your reading, and tune back in tomorrow. Thanks, guys.